decisions. These are my 8 decisions. These are my 8 decisions. The decisions for success. These are my 8 decisions.
Welcome.
As if we haven't been talking for 2 hours.
I know, exactly. Chase Geiser, welcome to Hendersonville, Tennessee. Welcome back home to Nashville.
Yeah, thank you.
You left us. You abandoned us. We were like, what the fuck did we say? Like, you were doing great here in Nashville, went to school at Belmont University. My business coach introduced us.
That's right, Chris.
And we started working together. That was way back in the day.
Wild ride. I think I was 23 years old when I started working for you.
Yeah, you were so
24.
optimistic and you were so naive. You had no idea. You had no idea about life.
No, I still don't, man.
But no, you knew more than many though.
Yeah. I mean, I knew I had values and principles that I knew I needed to exercise in order to be successful. I just didn't know how it was going to play out. So I knew that I needed to have a hard work ethic, that I needed to look people in the eye when I shook their hand, that I needed to ask more questions when I talked to people. I had, like an idea of good etiquette just to interact and deal with other people, but I had no experience. So I was low on knowledge, but I guess
I never saw you as low in knowledge. I saw you as curious to figure that shit out.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I was drawn to you, because you never, I never gave you like some kind of project and you were like, Robert, can you tell me exactly, where to start?
I remember one time you left for lunch and you walked up to the cubicle that I was in and you were going to tell me to do something or ask me about something. And you're like, I forgot what I was going to ask you. Just figure out how to make $1 million.
And maybe something I did. Yeah. I mean, it was really wild when you came to me, because during that time, I had just started with my business coach, and he was like, "Dude, you need someone to help you."
Yeah.
And I had tried. I think I had a virtual assistant at the time. Her name was April. She was from the Philippines and wasn't worthless, but wasn't all that valuable. I felt
Required
like
attention.
Yeah. A lot of attention. And you didn't require that.
No.
That was really good.
Well, I'm generally anxious if I'm not being productive. So if I'm not getting guidance, I just find something to do.
Yeah.
And, that was kind of the way it was when I worked for Alex, because, he's so busy and I had maybe, half a dozen things I needed to do that really only took about 2 hours. So I'm sitting at the office. What am I going to do for the next 6 hours a day? So you learn about AI, you learn about editing, you could develop ideas. And
Let's go. So I want to get there, because you worked for me for 3 years, 2 years.
It was 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And I was with you when I came up with Hitch.
Yeah.
You helped us get that off the ground, and you helped us get some money from the state of Tennessee. You did all the legwork to get a $100,000 grant, which helped us launch it, and it was awesome to have you. And probably the best, you set the stage on what was possible for working with me. And I've not been able to replace you. I've had people that did okay after you, but I was never able to find that. So I miss you, man.
That's a nice thing to say. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I miss you too.
And then so you go off, you quit to go start your own damn business, thinking you could, do better than me in business.
No, I didn't think I could do better than you. I just thought I could do better than $50,000 a year.
No. And you should have just asked for a raise, dude.
I know. In hindsight, yeah, I probably if 35-year-old me was like time swapped back into that time, I would have figured something else out.
But honestly, the 42-year-old me should have been recognizing that you were performing, and I should have paid you more.
Yeah.
And so lesson learned. And I think I've always, I guess I have always had, that's something I've struggled with, is like predetermined raises just for the fact that someone's been there a period of time, to me is like silly.
Sure.
I think, and this is a message to anyone, if you're creating a lot of value for your boss and you know it, then it's time to ask for more money.
Yeah, but employees don't think like that a lot of times.
I know.
You know, you're thinking of it from the perspective of a salesperson or an entrepreneur. Of course, you would ask for money. And this is one of the reasons, in my opinion, why women oftentimes make less money in the workforce than men. It's not because they're inferior or not as good at their jobs. In many ways, they're far superior at their jobs. They're more responsible. They're just on it. But there's a personality profile where they're more agreeable than men, and so they feel very uncomfortable. On not every woman, but on a trend, they feel more uncomfortable than a man would asking for more money. And so you see that reflected in the statistics. That's part of it. I mean, it's a complicated issue and a complicated answer, but employees, yeah, they won't. Well, what they'll do is they're, and from my experience, they're more comfortable finding another job than asking their current boss for more money.
Yeah.
And so you see people just hop around and they bounce.
And
bounce
they
their
never
salary up.
they never get that steady footing where they could really see a bigger picture to build something grander with the leader.
Right.
You know, and like, because they just kind of skip around for these little minute little lifts when they could have bigger ones, because I think it's the loyalty will give you more exponential possibility. If you just take these little bumps along the way, yeah, you can eventually get somewhere. But if you're really helping them get what they want out of the business and really be valuable, like finding every opportunity to ask yourself, all right, I got nothing to do. Well, I could play on my phone and look at a
Wait
bunch
till
of
5.
reels.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I could piss away the time and just, or I could like, how do I add more value here at the company? And if people just got obsessed with that way of working, I think we'd far better off.
Well, and they have to know that if they add more value at the company, that it's going to be returned. There's a famous moment in the movie Office Space where he's like, look, if I work an extra few hours and we ship off a few extra units, I don't see another dime. So where's the incentive? It's a famous, moment in that movie.
I know.
And so, yeah, I think as business leaders, we have to set up systems if we're going to scale a business where there's a culture of growth. And a lot of the tech companies in the 80s and the 90s, like the Apples and the Microsofts with the stock options and things like that, they kind of figured out how to, because there was basically a war going on between the Xeroxes and the IBMs and the Apples and the Microsofts. They were constantly poaching from each other. Even Adobe, there's a famous email from Steve Jobs to Adobe's leader. I don't know if you've ever seen this, where he says, I'm hearing that you are poaching from my team, and I was under the impression that we had an agreement not to poach from each other. Let me know whether or not that's still in place, because if it's not, then I'm going to take everyone from you now, and it's up to you kind of thing. And so they created this culture because they saw the value of the talent and the skill base, because there weren't that many computer scientists back then as there are now. And they created that culture in their companies. That's why you hear about people that are still working at Facebook that were employee number 17, or still working at Apple that were employee number 75. But nowadays you have people just bouncing over and over again through companies.
Yeah. And I think that happens. First off, it happens when you haven't figured out your why to be in that particular business. And that's why I think it's important that employees get help from their leader to help them understand why they even do what they do. Because if we can get them to find their why, then they can go through it from a different energy. And I think, I'm going back to thinking about why you did so well with me is because your dad was an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I grew up around small business owners. And
you grew up, you saw the struggle that your dad navigated with his business. I mean, it wasn't all great. I mean, I'm sure there was ups and downs. Did you see that? I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm making assumptions.
Yeah. I kind of an interesting upbringing because I don't think my dad really made any money. At least I didn't know it until I was about a sophomore in high school. So I grew up like waiting for Christmas to get the thing that I wanted, even 4, 5, 6 months. And I never felt like I wanted for anything, but it was just very modest. Like, don't ask for it. Don't even try if you're walking through the store to ask for the thing that you see on the shelf that you want. It's not gonna happen. You got plenty of things at home. I had 3 older brothers. My parents would always say you inherited all of their toys, So I go home and play with the He-Man toys from the 70s, Chase. You like those, And I kind of realized that my dad was having success when we bought a house just 2 or 3 houses down the road that was like the biggest house in the, it was like the rich guy's house, in the neighborhood growing up. And I was like, oh, Dad, you're doing pretty well. And then, he was able to he graciously pay for my college, which was expensive. So I was able to go to college debt free. So the point I'm trying to make is I grew up in a modest upbringing, but by the time I reached young adulthood, there was like this kind of almost like lottery type feeling for me. And there were some things that he did that were really good. Like I was really interested in music and audio engineering, and he wouldn't just buy me the equipment. He would do things like pay for half of it. Like whatever you pay, I'll pay. So I worked as a telemarketer for my brother Clay all summer between 8th grade and 9th grade to pay for the gear that I wanted so I could make music. And I remember the script. This is Chase Geiser with TLMA Consulting. I am sorry for calling out of the blue, but the reason we're calling is because we have several well-financed buyers in your area looking for companies just like yours. Have you given any thought to selling your business in the next 12 months or so? And I would just lead, qualified lead. And we'd send it off to whatever the client was, TLMA Consulting, I guess. I don't even know what it stands for. You know what I mean? But I did that 80 times an hour at the age of 15 with braces and a tie-dye shirt on and a can of Mountain Dew with the headset. and I bought my equipment. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, I didn't know that. Maybe you did tell me that story. But I think you, because of that upbringing, you saw what was necessary to be successful, and you knew that the way to do that is just add value.
Yeah.
100%. and find spots to add value.
One, you feel nervous too as like a young man about ready to graduate from college, because if you're really paying attention and you're not arrogant and self-righteous, you realize that very little of what you learned in class in college is actually valuable. And so once I realized that very early on in my college career, per se, and I just decided that I was going to use that time that I had where I didn't have to pay for anything to learn whatever it was that was valuable or network. And so I think a lot of the mistakes that people make when they're in college is they focus on the classes and not the unique opportunity they have with their time, where they're not worried to the extent that they will be later about how they're going to pay a mortgage, because they don't have a mortgage yet. They're living in a dorm, and even if they're taking out a bunch of student debt, it's paid for by the debt, right? It's like, this is 4 years that you have where you get to define yourself and meet whoever you want. Anybody that you ask to be your mentor will do it because you're young and they're so flattered that you asked, and then they'll personally see to it that you're successful, because if they mentored you and you fail, they're going to think it's because their mentorship was bad. And so, like, when you're 35, you ask for a mentor, maybe you got to pay him. Maybe that's your coach or your consultant. But when you're 22, they'll just let you do it. And that was my angle with Chris at the City Clubs. Like, look, I'm a student. I want to be president one day, Can you do something for me here? He like bent things over and made new policies and hooked me up with mentors that were sitting with me and buying me breakfast. And I'm at the top of this high rise. I got $300 in the bank.
It was so easy.
It's so easy, but nobody in college does it.
I know.
And maybe it's a difference of personality, but I just feel like there's probably a way to train people to at least like.
And the mentor gets it too.
Yeah.
The mentor gets it too. I mean, when you are mentoring someone else, you're like, you're speaking out loud this wisdom, right? And you're like, wait a minute, am I really doing that? Am I really following through with?
And it forces you to define what you know, but you didn't even necessarily know that you knew.
Yeah, and then it's also a lot of the like wisdom is the action. You got to do the thing. You can't just talk about the thing. And we sometimes can find the easy way. Fall into old habits and then forget what got us here, and we're ready to go to that next level. But we forgot the old disciplines that got us where we needed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I was thinking along the lines of what you just said about Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Famous book. He's a famous Stoic philosopher. He's one of the last great emperors of Rome, and everybody studies that book for wisdom, just like they study any philosopher for wisdom. The thing about Meditations that's really interesting to me is it was never intended for anyone else to read it. Right. It was what Marcus wrote when he was meditating or ruminating or thinking about things either in the morning or whatever. And so the value of that book is not reading it and studying it and learning from it. There is a value there, but the primary value, the lesson from it, is that you should write your own meditations.
Yeah.
Because the act of writing what you think and reflecting on your own life is going to give you more wisdom, more systems, more consistency, more integrity between your actions and your values than reading somebody else's book on, what they thought about their own life, their own leadership, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think what I think is interesting about that is, like, I think we have these assumptive rules in our head about our lives and our manual that we've created for ourselves. But we've never written out the manual.
Right.
And go, do I really believe what is in my head? Like
Right.
when you write it on a piece of paper, then you start to go, do I really believe that? Is it false belief? Is that real? Another thing I think is strange about the meditation is because he doesn't talk a lot about meditating.
Right.
He doesn't talk about sitting there in Zen and like receiving some download, which it says meditations.
Right. But it's a different use for the word. It's not like actually getting into a spiritual place.
But there is something that I think is missing in the meditations is to this discussion to like stop for a moment and let's take everything out of our mind and like really analyze what I really believe. Is this fear coming in my mind, this monkey mind that's telling me this and telling me that? Can I calm down long enough, breathe in a rhythm, settle down just long enough to go within and go, all right, what do I really believe? Without the fear there, because the fear is a totally different game. And the fear, I think to me, like I go through this roller coaster of emotions of feeling creative, ready to create a new idea or chase something new. And then at the same time, I step in this fear piece where I'm immobilized. I'm in scarcity. Like, who am I to do this? Who am I to do that?
Yeah. When I think about the meditating thing and the self-exploration thing and the identity thing, and this is kind of something that's a motif in the general new age self-improvement space, is I see it as absolutely necessary to do those exercises in order to experience self-actualization or fulfillment. But I've seen throughout my life, I'm not that old, but I've seen a lot of people get lost in it because it's a very comforting and desirable exercise. People love to think about their goals and they love to think about who they are and what they believe and kind of live in that space. And I've seen people who it's like every month they're going on an ayahuasca trip or every weekend they're doing it. You know what I mean? It's like, when are you going to actually take what you're learning from these experiences and like get back to work? Like you can't live there. You have to visit, but eventually you have to go back out into the front,
Yeah. Well, you have to have incremental growth. You got to be stepping into it every single time. Like you can't, and I mean, it's, trust me, I've seen this conscious community and I'm around them a lot and I think they're amazing, lovely people, but they're broke.
Yeah.
And they're amazing to be around. They really are. They're the most lovely people. When I'm around them, I vibrate well. I feel great.
Yeah.
And, but they won't pick up the phone and ask for the business.
Right.
They won't do that uncomfortable thing to get what they want.
So you have to do it intentionally. You have to use those techniques, those meditations, those methods, whether it's ecstatic dance or whatever, in order to project you into the person that you want to be, instead of the falling into the temptation of using it as an exercise to be content with where you are.
Yeah.
Because you can do that and use it to be like, you know what, I'm not worried about the fact that I'm not successful because I'm in this state of ecstatic dance and I'm not worried. You got to be real careful when you start playing with that realm. It's easy to read new age books into a place where you're satisfied with your crummy apartment and you don't care that you heard the gunshot outside. You're just like, no.
Hey, well, and at the same time, I could look at someone who's, got a 10-year-old Subaru and, they have
Rosie O'Donnell.
They have a apartment full of, a cat and a bunch of plants and they're happy as can be.
Sure. So who's wise, you know?
Yeah,
that person or the billionaire?
Exactly. And the way I think, where for me, you know, I've always been driven, always been ambitious. You know, I am really into this idea of doing what I love with those that I love. And that to me is a heaven on earth. But also, that also means that I should be growing, I should be progressing. And I want, I don't want to be satisfied. And I think God wants us to grow, wants us to flourish. And it's not just monetarily. It's just like, I think it's, to me, I love that part of it. And you know, this whole manifestation stuff is so wonky and weird, but when synchronicities happen, like for instance, we had a wild synchronicity thing.
Yeah.
I mean, before we even get into that, I mean, you go off, you start your own business, you're in digital marketing, you bail on Nashville, you go to Austin. Tell me, catch me up to speed. So you go and start your own business. What happened since?
Yeah. So 2016, I start social media advertising business. Moved to California. My wife and I decide that we want to move to Texas because we want to start a family, and it's impossible to afford anything in California. And it's going great. Had a huge year in 2020 during the pandemic. It was a really good time for digital marketing and e-commerce. And 2021 happened, and January 6th happened. Not to go political. Please stop me if you want me to stop. But I was very upset with how the political direction the country was going in. And some of the things that I was hearing from the mainstream media seemed like a recipe for disaster. Things like calling people domestic terrorists who probably aren't domestic terrorists, or saying that the greatest threat to national security is white supremacy. That was troubling to me to see, just my opinion. And so I started a podcast that was a political podcast. And I called it One American Podcast because I didn't want to say that I was a Republican. I didn't want to say that I was a Democrat. I just wanted to say that I'm just one American. That's it. That was the premise of it. And I began interviewing people, political influencers, business influencers, and was able to leverage up the caliber. Caliber is not really a bad word because not really a good word because some of my smaller guests were actually the best ones, but able to leverage up, I don't know, the status of my guests to the point where I had, you know, Roger Stones and Steve Bannon's on, and I eventually got hooked up with InfoWars with Alex Jones. And one of the hosts, Harrison Smith, a good friend of mine, a good man, his wife had a baby, and he was going to take 2 weeks off to be with his newborn child. And I filled in for him every day for 2 weeks for free. And then I asked for a job. They hired me, and I worked for Alex Jones for 2 years. And it was the craziest adventure I ever could have imagined for myself.
Yeah. For those who, you know, there are many people that are going to hear, you know, that his name and have all these assumptions.
Yeah. Fuck them.
And what do you say to those people about that? Because it's so politicized, and if all they've seen about Alex Jones is from CNN, what do they think?
Well, what happened was all the tech companies, in conjunction or synchronicity with a media campaign, banned Alex Jones within weeks. Twitter's, the Apples, the Googles, whatever, YouTube. And so they deplatformed him, so he had no exposure to the general public. He only had whatever audience he already had acquired, right, that he could reach. And then after they deplatformed him, they just did hit piece, hit piece, hit piece. And so he calls it like a case of stolen identity, where he was unable to say who he was to the public, and he was just he wouldn't use the word victim, but he was the victim of like a media campaign against him without being able to say anything back. So that's what happened to Alex. And look, I know him really well. He's not a perfect human being. I didn't expect him to be, but he is 100% a good man. And he's not a liar. He's not always right, though. Alex Jones was right. He's right most of the time. But yeah.
And there's some important parts in history when he was right.
Like, yeah, July 25th, 2001, he predicted that the World Trade Center was going to be attacked and they were going to blame Osama bin Laden. And he even said, call the White House right now and tell them you're not going to fall for it when they do it. It's like nailed it several months ahead of time. Wild. He actually had an even crazier prediction back in March of that year where he said they were going to fly planes into buildings. And that's this lesser known one. And yeah, I mean, he's brilliant. He's a genius. He's the most talented salesman and broadcaster that I've ever met. He's the most unique person that I've ever met. I make the joke a lot when I try to describe him to people because everybody that I know that hears that I work for him asks me what he's like, just like you did. And I say there's 26 personality profiles in the Myers-Briggs personality template, and Alex Jones is the 27th. I know now as a 35-year-old man that I will never meet anybody else like Alex Jones, and I'm so grateful that I knew him, that I know him.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And how have you shifted with that experience? Because suddenly you're being seen by millions of people.
Yeah.
You're talking politics. You're kind of in the zeitgeist of all the things that are going on in the world, and really knowing all these different angles. You get a little bit of inside baseball. But how has that shifted your mindset around being an American, first off?
Well, man, that is a good question, and it's so tough to answer. Alex Jones reaffirmed something in me that I intuitively believed, but doubted. He reaffirmed the necessity of saying what you really think or how you really feel, regardless of the consequences. And that's something that was very deeply personally important to me to discover, but also deeply reaffirming of what it means to be an American, because there's a reason the First Amendment is the First Amendment. And I've said this on air before, that even if I disagreed with everything that Alex Jones said, I would still support him with all of my energy, because he has become a symbol of freedom of speech. He's become basically a martyr of freedom of speech. And so I'm so proud that I worked for him, and glad that I worked for him, and glad to call him a friend, because he just, I don't know, I wanted it to be true that you should be able to say what you think and how you feel and burn the ships, and it'll always work out, and it's always the right thing to be able to do that and to do that. I wanted it to be true, and Alex Jones proved to me that that was true.
Well, help me correct this, because I feel like, and I'm just going to tell you from my personal experience, I'll have this desire. Let's say I'm not feeling in my best state. Okay, let's say I'm in a little of a fear state. I would be drawn to that content, because a lot of the stuff that he's talking about is fear-based,
Sure.
The fall of the United States and all these little.
But Robert, they are putting chemicals in the water that turn the frogs gay.
Chemtrails. There's a lot of shit that he's talking about. Like now, it's like I just saw a podcast about chemtrails, and I think I was first heard about it like 15 years ago, and I'm like, the stuff that I don't, I think we all came away with 2020 going, I don't trust what they're telling us. Now, I kind of suspected on the news they weren't saying the truth, but now I really know.
Right.
And the news creates a lot of fear. Talking about the news creates more fear. But it's this shadow self in mind that is drawn to that fear, but it gives you like a little bit of a dopamine hit, but it doesn't last very long, and it's very empty. Like it satisfies, but it does leave you empty. How can you make?
Well, Robert, listen, you're a really smart guy. I've been doing this 30 years, and it's not about what you're fighting against; it's about what you're fighting for.
So I know exactly what you're saying, but I've never.
But the question is, can you sell creation versus fear?
I don't think he sells fear. And if you're having that experience listening to his content, then that's a genuine experience. The experience that I have when I listen to Alex Jones is I get like fired up and inspired. It's kind of like, if you were to watch Braveheart, or if you were to watch Lord of the Rings, and There's the famous speeches right before the battle, like many years from now, when you're dying in your bed, you look back on this day and wish that you had just one chance. Like Braveheart isn't like, hey man, those guys are going to fuck up a lot of us. You know, they're evil bastards.
Well,
like, and Alex isn't either. Alex is like, look, these globalists are evil. They're satanic. They want to traffic your children.
Yeah,
they're trying to conglomerate all political power, and we can fight back if we act now. And so it's not so much like, oh my gosh, like the Huns are coming situation. It's I need to like tell my friends, my family, I need to vote like this way.
Okay, maybe where I get lost.
And go to the AlexJonesStore.com right now and get methylene blue.
Well, the question is like, what do you do? Because I think that's because it's like, all right.
Well, you know the answer.
No, hear me out.
Yeah.
So here I am, 51-year-old dude. I got 2 kids. I'm trying to run a business. I don't want to go through the trouble getting involved in politics to solve our nation's woe. I don't have time. So what do you do?
It's easy, man. You just refuse to be anything other than your best self.
There we go. Well,
that's it.
Yeah.
And Jordan Peterson says this. I know he's controversial, but he's right when he says before you try to change the world, you've got to make your bed. Because if you don't have your things together in your life, then what are you doing out there protesting? What are you doing out there whining? Like, you don't have it together. So my interpretation when I listen to Alex Jones is if I'm really upset or offended by the evil that is obviously trying to conglomerate political power and influence and control and subjugate humanity. And those are big words. And I know it sounds paranoid and schizophrenic, but you look at what's happening, like that's the trend, whether it's consciously happening in a conspiracy or just the natural order of things. That's the trend. Power conglomerates, coagulates, it subjugates, it dissipates, and it all starts over again. Fall of Rome, boom, rise of the United States, fall of the United States, whatever comes next. And when I hear Alex Jones talk about this evil that we face, it just makes me want to be a better person as an individual. It doesn't make me want to run for governor or get involved with the school board. Like, yeah, I want to pay more attention, maybe be a better steward of my citizenship and, vote at least and have an opinion. But all it makes me want to do is like eat better, take care of myself, and I know that he's, ebbed and flowed in his own health and stuff. And you can see that too. He's in much better shape than he was a year ago. But I see him as somebody that just gets me fired up to at least not be part of the problem. Even if I can't solve the problem, I can determine that I will not be complicit.
Just be accountable for your own actions.
Yeah.
I can see that. I mean, I appreciate you sharing that.
But if it's not your bag, then watch CNN.
Well, yeah. Well, it's funny. I grew up. I grew up in Germany, and we had the nightly news.
Would you say it was superior?
No, it was no. I was watching. I had one TV station. It was AFN, Armed Forces Network, and we had no commercials. And so my upbringing was interesting because every commercial was a public service announcement. So I was on an army base, and so the commercials were, "Don't shop when you're hungry. No, no, no. Like when you go grocery shopping, you're going to overspend if your stomach's empty." Okay.
Why would they tell you that?
Because it's a pretty good advice. It's a public service announcement.
That's so nice.
And, or this was another one. When you're out at the club, there could be spies around. Loose lips sink ships.
They were saying that when you were growing up in Germany?
Yeah, so this is Armed Forces Network. This was the
That's
ads.
like from the 40s.
Yeah, but these were, it's really smart to tell these troops not to talk about your operations that you have on the weekend for training because there are terrorists around.
Right.
Makes a lot of sense. Don't beat your wife.
That was one of them?
Yes.
They had an ad not to beat your wife?
Yes.
We know you've been through a lot, soldier. Don't take it out on your wife and kids.
Domestic abuse was a thing. Alcoholism was a thing.
Wow.
That was my education between the Cosby Show, in between the A-Team. This is the messaging that I got.
How do you feel about that though? Like being a kid.
It's wonderful.
You're watching Cosby and it's like, by the way, somebody's dad's beating somebody's mom.
No, I think that is why I have grown up with a set of values that have lasted this long.
Wow.
I think they're meaningful. And an American kid growing up in the 70s and 80s, the commercial was the latest product to buy or what to eat, pizza. I mean, there's all these ads, but imagine all of that is good for you. Education, propaganda is what it was. I know, but don't we kind of need a little bit of propaganda when you're kind of trying to figure out life?
That's a good question. And it's difficult to answer because I have described the work that I've done as propaganda before. And I've always said that the difference between what I do and what CNN does is that I'm actually telling you the truth. Right? So what you described to me is all true. Like, don't beat your wife, loose links do sink ships, and, don't shop for groceries when you're hungry, you'll buy too much crap, right? That's all true stuff. But it's also propaganda. Propaganda has a negative connotation, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think it goes a level deeper than that. It's not about like how good propaganda is. It's about how important it is to protect freedom of speech, because in the context of the truth, lies cannot survive.
Right.
Censorship has only ever served the purpose of silencing or suppressing the truth. You don't have to censor lies in order for the truth to survive.
Right. No,
but you do have to censor truth in order for lies to survive. So rather than thinking of it as should we have good propaganda, I think we should just ensure that there's always freedom of speech and it'll take care of itself.
The CNN of the 80s for me was a 30-minute headline news, and they had the headline story, and they went through what was going on. And it was like, so there was no commentary. Challenger explosion. This happened. And it was like, Nixon, this happened. I never thought in a million years that they would ever be trying to sway me one way or the other. Now, maybe I was super naive. I was young. I was in high school. I didn't know. But it never really occurred to me until much later in my life that how much political influence was happening in the newsroom.
Yeah, I mean, it goes all the way back to Operation Mockingbird. That was a whole operation from the CIA to deliberately and intentionally infiltrate radio stations, massive television programming, and massive news media. Operation Mockingbird. And what they did was they intentionally put journalists on the payroll or intentionally had assets installed as journalists, pundits, broadcasters in these institutions in order to ensure during the Cold War that everybody was on the same page about the threat of communism.
Yeah,
and it goes back, and it goes all the way back to ancient times too. I mean, Caesars were doing that stuff too. It's a tale as old as time.
Yeah,
and we even ran a promo on Infowars, which I was proud to create, that went through these famous moments throughout history, and it was all made with AI, about how the information war's always been there. I mean, even going back to the Garden of Eden, the idea of the snake, you will have the knowledge of good and evil. That was the start of the information war. Then you go through Caesar and the conspiracy against him. And every single major transition that we've gone through as a species has been because there's a war going on between what is true and what is a lie. And when it can't be settled with communication, or when there's just a discrepancy in the amount of power or control over information, that's when blood is shed. Even our own revolution was in and of itself an information war. You've got King George, who believes that he has been crowned king by the voice of God, and you've got the rebels here that are just like, that's BS. I think we're going to just be independent, And which one's true? Well, let's fight it out. And see
we'll
who
figure
wins.
it out.
Yeah, hard way.
Yeah. So maybe Chase comes back to Nashville.
Yeah, I'd like that.
And fight the new war in your hometown.
Sounds
we'll
good.
Make Nashville back hometown.
Yeah, I'd like it, man. I'm ready to move away from Arkansas. It was a nice place to visit for a while.
Awesome. Well, good to have you back.
It's an honor and pleasure to be with you.